on Network Africa today. Sudan residents crave for early ceasefire even as conflicts continue. Senegalese opposition leader Ousmane Sonko calls for protest against President Macky Sall seeking a third term. Plus, Kenyan President William Ruto lifts ban on logging, hopes to plant 15 billion trees over the next 10 years. Hello and welcome to Network Africa for today. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Anne Mwawadu. We begin with stories and happenings that made headlines over the weekend.
Over the weekend, a 6-story building collapsed while under construction in Côte d'Ivoire's commercial capital, Abidjan, killing at least 7 of the builders on site. Firefighters at the scene said on Saturday, around midday local time, the workers heard cracking sounds and the building started to crumble around them. Rescue efforts were ongoing at the site in Abidjan's upscale Riviera Palmeraie district on Saturday, with emergency workers searching through a vast pile of shattered concrete and debris. A further 9 people were wounded in the collapse. Such accidents are relatively frequent in Ivory Coast and elsewhere in West Africa, particularly in the rainy season, due to poor enforcement of building regulation and the use of often substandard construction material. In Kenya, at least 48 people were killed in a road accident in the western region after a lorry carrying a shipping container veered off the road and plowed into several vehicles. Footage of the accident's aftermath showed the twisted wreckage of cars and motorbikes alongside damaged minibuses and trucks. The Kenya Red Cross said the lorry rammed more than 6 vehicles and ran over pedestrians, with more than 20 casualties taken to local hospitals. A death toll makes the accident one of the most deadly on Kenya's roads in recent years. Last year, 34 people died in central Kenya when their bus veered off a bridge and plunged into a river valley. Finally, the United Nations Security Council unanimously voted to end a decade-long peacekeeping mission in Mali after the West African country's military abruptly asked 13,000 forced to leave. But some Western nations expressed concern over the role played in the country by Russia's Wagner mercenary group. The end of the operation, known as MINUSMA, follows years of tension and government restrictions that have hobbled peacekeeping air and ground operations since Mali teamed up in 2021 with Russia's Wagner group, which was behind an abortive armed mutiny in Russia last weekend.
As we know, the transitional government of Mali requested MINUSMA's departure when the United Kingdom would not have chosen to withdraw MINUSMA at this moment, when Mali and the wider Sahel are facing increasing instability and humanitarian needs. And we do not believe that partnership with the Wagner Group will deliver long-term stability or security for the Malian people.
I would like to reassure you of the full engagement of the government of Mali to continue working tirelessly to fulfill its primary mission of protecting the civilian population and their property over all our national territory. On this point, the government regrets that the Security Council continues to consider the situation in Mali as a threat to international peace and security, in spite of the tangible results achieved on the one hand on the ground by the Malian forces.
UN peacekeepers are credited with playing a vital role in protecting civilians against an Islamist insurgency that has killed thousands. Some experts fear the security situation could worsen when the mission departs, leaving Mali's under-equipped army alone with about 1,000 Wagner fighters to combat militants who control swathes of territory in the desert north and center.
Let's talk about the conflict in Sudan now. Residents there desperately hope for an early ceasefire as the conflict between the Sudanese army and the paramilitary rapid support forces, the RSF, continue in the greater capital area, Darfur, and other regions in the country. The Sudanese army and the RSF continued to exchange fire in the capital area yesterday. The fighting was fierce in areas like south of Khartoum and the north of Omdurman. The armed conflict in Sudan has so far shown no sign of abating since it began on April the 15th, despite the ceasefire deals reached intermittently between the warring sides over the past few weeks. According to the United Nations Office for Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, more than 2.1 million people are internally displaced since April the 15th, including 1.4 million people who have fled the capital, Khartoum. More than 560,000 people fled across the border into neighboring countries, mainly to Egypt, Chad, and South Sudan. Meanwhile, Sudanese in Sudan, the capital city of Khartoum and its surrounding areas, are facing dire medical conditions. Most hospitals are out of operation, leaving many people nowhere to seek medical treatment. Since the outbreak of the armed conflict in Sudan, the capital area is one of the regions most affected by this conflict, where infrastructure has been greatly damaged. According to statistics coming from the Sudan Medical Council, 59 of the 89 hospitals in the capital area have completely suspended services. The remaining 30 are fully or partially operating, but a considerable number of them can only provide emergency services. In Omdurman, a city with a population of more than 1 million, there is only one hospital still struggling to offer services. However, it is also facing difficulties like water and electricity cutoffs, shortage of medical supplies, insufficient medical staff, and many more challenges. But the hospital is simply unable to deal with a large number of injured patients. Let's talk to VOA's Africa's correspondent, Maria Modialo, who joins us now from Nairobi, Kenya. Thank you very much, Mariama, and it's good to see you.
Good to see you too, Anne, and thanks for having me.
Yeah. Let's begin with an update on the latest as we speak, especially the clashes in the capital area that happened yesterday.
Yes, thank you, Anne. And obviously, the fighting hasn't stopped. It continues in Khartoum, and it continues also in other parts of Sudan, as reported in places like the Darfur area in Niala and also in Janaina. And also in the Kordofan area, also fighting is reported in that area. Obviously, at this point, the ceasefires have obviously not worked. With the Jeddah, recently the Jeddah talks being suspended, and also efforts from the IGAD group that started and that talked about maybe the possibility of meeting in person with the two generals. And I think they had a timeline of 10 days, but that also had stalled just because I think the Kenyan president, having been designated to lead the group of 4 countries, I think it was Somalia, Ethiopia, Djibouti, and South Sudan, but then with a leader as Ruto, but that also fell through because basically one of the generals decided that he did not want President Ruto to actually lead that pack. He would prefer the South Sudanese President Salva Kiir. So basically, that's what's been happening, and even with that, the diplomatic side trying to work some kind of solution here, it looks like that has not deterred the generals, and fighting continues.
All right, but many hospitals have suspended operations as a result of this crisis. Those that are still running barely have enough supplies. We've seen all the challenges they're facing. What is it like for those who actually need medical attention, especially those who are very urgent, who need help? Where do they even turn to when the health system is on the verge of collapse?
Well, the short answer, Anne, is that they have nowhere to turn. Obviously, from our VOA reports and what other agencies are reporting, 70% or more of the hospitals of the healthcare system is out of commission. I mean, you have aid organizations such as the MSF that has basically had some clinics, let's say in the beginning it was in the Darfur area. I think they still do. Around Al Fashir and things like that, and somewhere in Khartoum, and trying to basically perform emergency surgeries. And I can imagine also just trying to deal with people who are coming in wounded, because of the war. So those things are there. But obviously, from just the reports we've seen earlier, what they're dealing with is all they're trying to do is dealing with the emergency stuff. So if you have, other conditions, I'm sure for them it's a triage issue at this point to try to save the ones who need it the most. So basically, yeah, the short answer is that there is nowhere to go. And I think MSF is also reporting that it's not just the hospitals, the health facilities, but they recently reported outbreaks of measles at an IDP camp. So I think they've reported about 13 children who have come in and who have died from measles. So that is also another issue. And right before I came into this call, I'm just going to read you real quick. I got a news alert from another group that's called Project Hope. And basically, I'm just going to read a quick quote from them saying that we need a break in violence to catch basically our breath. And this one, they're basically sounding the alarm on the healthcare workers, the few of them who are actually in the hospitals and in clinics trying to help out, saying that health workers in Sudan are resilient, but they have reached a breaking point. Basically, the health facilities that are left continue to be targeted. And when medical shipments do arrive, many are destroyed or stolen by armed groups. Though that's just basically a quick news alert that I got right before I got on, basically talking about the mental health of everyone, especially the health workers, is it's just in dire situation at this point.
Well, I mean, we can only imagine, but with lots of damage on critical infrastructure already happening, many wonder how the country begins to scale up efforts to even rebuild, because a lot of times when people go to war, they do not remember that there is something called rebuilding at the end of all of this.
Well, I think it's a great question. Starting to think about rebuilding, but I think at this point, in this urgent situation, the fact that there are no way to stop fighting between the two generals. I think the biggest priority right now is to basically have a ceasefire that will hold. And I think once that ceasefire is reached, for however long it lasts, if it's a week or 2 weeks, then deal with opening the humanitarian corridors and trying to deal with the urgent needs of the healthcare facilities, of basic food and basic necessities. After that, then maybe figure out a way to get these two generals around the table and discuss and find a way to dialogue with these guys. Just to start. And I think after then, if there is any kind of agreement, then go from there. But I think reconstruction, it's, there's a long way to go at this point with everything that's going on in the country. And I think the basic need, the most basic need right now is definitely to have a ceasefire, and then everything else.
I know you're in Nairobi, Kenya, but give us a picture of what it is like over there. How are Kenyans weighing on this crisis? And what is there to learn from other countries across Africa about war?
I think another great question. I mean, I think in the beginning of the war, everybody was reporting on the war. And I think in Kenya, given that it's a country where when people were fleeing, the embassies were closing, countries were trying to take their people out. I think Kenya was a good place. I would think like a lot of, because of the stability, the airport was used a lot. And then also the Kenyans reported a lot about the other Kenyans who were fleeing from the war. But at some point, I also asked, because I don't feel like, and I just have to be honest, that the war is being covered as much. I watch, basically, maybe I work during the day and I don't have time to watch TV. But when I come in at night, I don't see a lot of coverage, and I don't understand because the regional implications affect everybody, including Kenya. But to be fair, I think the Kenyan government has also had a lot that they're dealing with. They've had the demos that have been related to the high cost of living. They've had the Shakahola massacre. Recently, they voted on a financial bill with certain commodities like the price of gas going up. So they have a lot of internal also issues, and I think it's hard to concentrate on what's happening in another country. But you see in and out, and also the fact that I think you get coverage when you have President Ruto being part of that IGAD bloc trying to mediate the crisis. Then you see coverage. But certainly, I wish I could see a little bit more coverage on this end.
All right.
But
Thank you.
To be fair, I have to say when I talk to analysts, they know what's going on. They are on top of things. So I just want to be fair to the country.
All right. I will give it enough coverage as much as we can. Thank you very much, VOA's Africa correspondent, Maria Modialo from Nairobi, Kenya. Thank you always for your contribution on Network Africa.
Thank you for having me, Anne.
Still ahead on the program. $10.3 billion worth of projects signed at third China-Africa Trade Expo. We'll bring you the details in a moment. They stay with us. Welcome back. Let's head to Senegal now, where opposition leader Ousmane Sonko is calling on the public to come out en masse to protest against President Macky Sall seeking a third term. The incumbent is scheduled to give a speech later to announce whether he will run for president in 2024, something most legal experts say will violate the Senegalese constitution. Last month, thousands of protesters took to the streets of various Senegalese cities after Mr. Sonko was sentenced to 2 years in prison for a crime of corrupting youth. These clashes were the deadliest in recent history. Mr. Sonko's supporters and some political observers are saying that the case was an attempt to block him from running in next year's presidential election. The Constitution limits presidents to 2 terms in office, but Mr. Sall's supporters argue that this should be reset because a new constitution was adopted in 2016. In South Africa, 7 opposition political parties, including the main opposition Democratic Alliance, have announced that they will hold discussions to outline a pact that they hope will unseat the ANC from government at next year's election. Although the group does not include the country's 3rd largest political force, that's the Economic Freedom Fighters, the 7 opposition parties are hoping to get an agreement after talks. In a joint statement, they say the incumbent governing party is set to lose its majority when voters go to the polls next year. They also say that they want to present a united front that is stable, viable and effective, and plan to meet 2 days next month to hammer out a deal. The ANC, which is the party that led the struggle against apartheid, has seen a gradual slide in its support in recent years. At the last municipal elections back in 2021, it recorded a national vote of less than 50%. Let's head to Kenya now, where the President, William Ruto, has lifted a ban on logging imposed 6 years ago. The president said the move was overdue, citing the need to create jobs and open up sectors in the economy that depend on forest products. Concerns over the impact of logging on the environment and the climate change prompted this ban back in 2018. Mr. Ruto defended the lifting of the ban, saying the moratorium on logging had been foolish, and he said in his words that trees are decaying in the forest while people are struggling to get timber. He also said the government had imposed taxes on anyone importing timber and furniture in the recent budget because they want all that to be made by the Kenyan people. The ban on logging has affected many areas where many people have depended on logging as a source of their own livelihoods. But the lifting of the ban is coming as the government pushes on with its plan to plant 15 billion trees over 10 years to increase the country's tea tree cover. Kenyan journalist Cyrus Ombati joins me now for more on this. Hello, Cyrus. Thank you for joining us on Network Africa.
Good evening. How are you? You're fine. We're in Kenya.
All right. Now, first, how are loggers in Kenya reacting to the lifting of this ban? I mean, this is coming out 6 years after.
After all of the ban, which was imposed in 2018 by the then government, now Mr. Ruto has come in power and is lifting the whole exercise because people are seeing it as a way of it's politics, business to make money by his friends, by the relatives, as you can say, And because it's coming at a time when he's himself is leading a campaign to plant 15 billion trees in a year by 2020, in the next 3 years. So MENA is seeing it as it's a political or business game now.
But do you see it as a move or means of encouraging locally made products, thereby curbing timber importation? I mean, the president has also said he wants furniture to be locally made in Kenya.
I mean, that has not been an issue because, for example, timber imported from countries like Uganda or DRC is cheaper as compared to local manufactured timber. The argument that when you harvest timber locally to make it more cheaper is not there. Actually, when you talk to those actors who are behind the ban of this logging, they are saying that the whole campaign is a mockery on its campaign because it can't be whatever it's trying to push, because the country's forest cover had been depleted. So far, he has not met what his goals were for him to be able to lift this ban so far.
Well, the government is also seeking in all of this to plant 15 billion trees over the next 10 years. How do you think this can be achieved? Do they have any plan?
Well, it has been a kind of a call by every regional administrator to ensure that whenever they have a public event, people plant up to 200 trees. But that also depends on the availability of rain, because most parts of the country are dry for now. It's a cold season in Nairobi, in Kenya. And apart from the western part of the country, you find that places beyond in the eastern part of the country is dry. So driving that agenda is also dependent on the climate itself, which is trying also to fight. The area where we went to make that announcement is part of the Mao catchment area, which is a rain catchment area. So by trying to lift the ban, it's also affecting the whole drive we ask for more rain in the region to enhance the tree planting itself.
Talking about the climate change, I mean, there's been immediate comments about the climate community and, of course, climate change activists regarding this, knowing full well that the impact of logging on the environment prompted this ban in 2018. What is your thoughts about this?
Well, even the activists themselves, they are saying they're holding a meeting tomorrow because they knew the whole thing was coming. It was coming because they had been lobbying among those loggers who are behind the exercise. So they're holding a meeting tomorrow to announce the way forward. We don't know whether the activities or their protests will be able to make any impact on the government to stop the whole logging. But the regime is hell-bent to actually have the exercise go on. So it's a wait and see game to know what will happen next.
All right. Thank you very much, Cyrus, for your time on Network Africa, as always.
Thank you.
Nigeria and China will continue to collaborate on several fronts in order to improve and strengthen its bilateral relationship. The Chinese ambassador to Nigeria, Guo Chuanchun, made this remark while 3 Chinese military vessels made a port call to the Western Naval Command right here in Lagos.
I do believe this visit really demonstrates the harmony symphony between Niger and China. I think that this military visit is for peace. The peace that with Niger and China, we can work together not only for the 2 countries, not only for the regions, but I think we can make a contribution to the international community. And this visit, I do believe that can establish deepen the cooperation between the Navy sectors, especially military sectors. I know that it's time for China, PLA, and the Niger Defense Force and the military sector to work together to build our strengths, to counter the challenge, overcome the obstacles. And I am confident that this trip will do more things to facilitate, promote the relation between the 2 great countries.
And finally on the program, the 3rd China-Africa Economic and Trade Expo in central China's Hunan province concluded yesterday with $10.3 billion worth of projects signed. The expo, which held in Changsha City, themed Common Development for a Shared Future, aimed at boosting business links between the 2 sides while welcoming more made-in-Africa products into the Chinese market.
The China-Africa Economic and Trade Expo attracted over 100,000 visitors, including 1,700 foreign visitors and 900 on-site buyers and professional visitors. According to the statistics from the Expo's organizing committee, the 4-day event saw a record high in the Expo's 5-year history. A total of 120 projects with a value of $10.3 billion were signed at the event. Additionally, 11 African countries announced 74 cooperative projects, the largest number in the Expo's history.
The economic and trade cooperation between China and Africa has been expanding from traditional trade and engineering construction to digital, green and financial fields. In particular, the import of agricultural products from Africa shows great cooperation potential.
Visitors from Africa said that the Chinese market has much to offer their businesses and populations. Meanwhile, several business leaders from across the African continent discussed the factors driving economic and trade growth between China and Africa. Andrew Gatara, founder and managing director of tourism company G-Step Group, asserted that the gathering is a chance to advance cooperation on both sides.
The feeling is that this is a very huge market, and having this expo between Africa and China being held in this city, it brings so many advantages, not only to the local people of Changsha here, but also the people of Africa. This is a very big platform. The feeling is positive. This is a big chance for cooperation on both sides.
John Nkandu, executive director of NewCaf Uganda, one of the country's primary coffee exporters, pointed to demographic factors that he said are crucial to accelerating trade growth.
I think number one, driver are the younger people.
Younger people?
The younger people, because they bring about, real consumption. We are also looking at population. The population of Africa is growing, okay? In the same way, of course, historically, China has been ahead of the game in terms of population growth, and that in itself means increased consumption, and therefore meaning increased trade.
China is Africa's largest trading partner, and official data show that bilateral trade between China and Africa totaled $282 billion in 2022.
And that's Network Africa for today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Anne Nwawadu. Enjoy the rest of the week.